you'll see a little slide deck that I put together. For context, everyone, it's a bit last minute on my end, so I apologize if I'm a bit rusty in terms of my presentation skills and so on and so forth. Yeah, so basically just a quick introduction of myself. So I'm actually a part of the Nextwork community. I've met a few of you in person, and Jess, we were on the same group in the project. So I was doing Summer of Azure. And at the same time, I've also already moved into the tech workforce in BA consultancy, along with having a background in graduate recruitment and also professional recruitment overseas in Japan. So really the purpose today is me for sharing kind of a combination of all these lessons that I've learned on both the professional side, transitioning into the tech industry, and then also a whole bunch of funny stories, hopefully, along the way. So without further ado, if I share this, is that coming up? Okay. I hope so. Yeah, so the first thing, again, just talking about today's presentation, so it's just going to be really a bit of an overview of my journey into the tech industry. And you can see on the right there, there's a big picture about career. So we're going to be talking a lot about that there and how I kind of made my way into the tech industry and all the fun little missteps and stories I had and how I got into there. And then just a quick agenda. So we'll do a short little icebreaker activity using something called Slido, just to kind of see where everyone's at and so on. And then I'll do a little bit of a talk into my journey into the tech industry, because I didn't start out in tech. So it's quite interesting to show how my career has transitioned about 4 or 5 times to end up here. And then I'm happy to either share a few tips about how I approach my career development to get into the tech industry, or we can just jump straight into some Q&A, depending on what people are interested in learning about. So first things first, this is a little tool called Slido, which is actually an online interactive word cloud tool. So if you can either join using slido.com or scan the QR code, I'd like to kind of get a bit of an idea from the audience as to what you'd like to get out of this session, or there's any specific advice or tips you'd want to hear about. Because the topic of job hunting or career development, it's really broad, and it can be quite daunting at times. So I just kind of want to get a bit of an idea as to what people are wanting to know about, and also get a feel as to where people are at. So I can start to see there's a few people typing already. It's really cool. Oh. Okay, so yeah, we can talk a little about the current climate. Is it harder to get jobs now? Any regrets or anything you do differently? Well, there's a lot of those, but we'll get into that. Oh, there's a lot of things there. Certifications, ideally required experiment cert, Salesforce experience, balancing personal life and professional life. Well, you'll find out very soon. I'm not very good at that, but that's okay. Interview process. Yep, I can talk a little bit about that. Happy to do that. Biggest step in your journey, best traits, put skills for the recruiters, cloud, data, engineering, internships. Cool, I'll just leave it for a little bit longer just to get an idea from everyone, and then we'll move on. All right. So what I'm seeing is yeah, like a lot of biggest mistake. Well, that's a hard one. Getting a foot in the door. Okay, entry level tech jobs without tech experience. Cool. All right. Well, I think a lot of the questions here and ideas that people are asking about that will come out into my story, because I was someone who kind of, again, as I said, transitioned into the tech industry, but I also did it through different pathways, through internships. I didn't have any tech experience, and you know, I had to find my way to get a foot into the door, as someone's put up in there. So from sharing from that there, you might get some ideas as to how I sort of went about things, and also we can start to cover some of the questions after that. So cool. Thanks everyone for sharing about that. Yeah, so this is my life literally on a page right now. Originally myself, so I was born and raised in Upper Hutt, which is about 30 minutes from Wellington. My family's Chinese. We're originally from Guangzhou, but I'm fourth generation. So we've been in New Zealand at least about a good 100 years now or so, and pretty well settled and established here. And I sort of had two passions for life when I was younger, which led me to study. Well, number one, it was international relations and Japanese. So I went to this university in Palmerston North, which is Amber's old haunt, called IPC, now called IPU. And I did a Bachelor of International Studies, and also, yeah, studied international relations and Japanese. And during that time there, I was actually quite involved in a whole bunch of different student activities. And I guess I stood out a little bit. So I was involved in all sorts of like volunteer groups. I was involved in all sorts of different clubs. I ended up being dormitory leader for 2 years. And I ended up being student president as well in 2009. So it's kind of a little bit high profile, I suppose, in the university campus and so on up there. And that actually led to my first job. So IPC at the time just said, hey, do you want to stay on and work for us for a couple of years or something like that? So I didn't even ask for the job there, didn't even apply. They just offered it to me based on what I was doing as a student. And yeah, that started out my career in international education. So I started out really doing things like student support, which was just looking after different international students as they came to New Zealand and made their way through the world here. And I also did a lot of things around recruitment as well. So the picture in the top left there was me managing a bunch of students who come over from Japan to experience New Zealand culture and so on and so forth. So I did that for like Japanese students from Southeast Asia, like Thailand and Vietnam. And I also did it for students locally in New Zealand as well. And yeah, by then it was probably about 2011, and I was kind of like, well, I only really know Upper Hutt and Palmerston North, and I was kind of keen to kind of go overseas and stuff. And I ended up moving to Thailand in 2011, which was a bit of a random decision because I didn't really have a reason other than the fact that I had some friends there who were like, come to Thailand, it's fun. And one of my professors sort of was going back to Thailand too at the time. So he says, you come over, I'll be able to help you out here and there. And basically, yeah, I put international education, but the reality was that I was an English teacher, and that's me. In the top right, there was a picture of me and my students during Songkran. So I did that there for a couple of years. And by chance, actually, I ended up in a town that was really closely connected to Japan. So there was a lot of different expats based over from Japan, especially in the automobile industry, like Toyota and Honda and stuff. And they sort of, yeah, I got to know them just by doing things like jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and for random networks like this. And because they couldn't speak English or Thai, they just spoke to me in Japanese. So my Japanese got really good, actually living in Thailand for 2 years. And they just sort of taught me the ins and outs too about life as a Japanese businessman and stuff and so on and so forth. And I guess that kind of inspired me on my next journey, where I moved to Japan in 2013 because I was like, well, I'm sort of in my mid-20s. I don't want to be an English teacher anymore. The only thing that I've really learned about is, you know, knowing about Japanese culture and Japanese business and language and stuff. So moved to Japan in 2013, and I went in a study pathway, which was quite rare at the time because not many New Zealand students do that. And I ended up studying at a language school for a year and a half, which was really good because a lot of the students, which is the picture in the middle left there, they were all from like China, like Southeast Asia and stuff, and they all wanted to go study at like, prestigious universities and get ahead of their careers. So it was a really competitive environment, and that pushed me to get JLPT N2, which is supposedly business level Japanese, but I'm not sure if I'm that good anymore. And yeah, I took that opportunity there and experience, and I went through the whole Japanese job hunting process as a New Zealander. So I went along to all these different interviews and different sort of group meetings and all these kinds of things to try find a job. I took the first opportunity I could because it was quite a competitive market in the small little startup in Shibuya, doing international sales and marketing for this e-commerce firm. And I did that for a couple of years, and I kind of found out that actually working in a Japanese company isn't as fun as I thought it was because you do a lot of late hours. My boss was making me regret learning Japanese a lot because his feedback was so brutal at times. And also, the instability in the organization too was quite apparent, especially when there was a bit of economic downturn, just because the market's so competitive. And at the time, I wasn't actually looking for opportunities. I was even thinking probably of coming back to New Zealand. But what happened was that I got a random message on LinkedIn from my boss, Phil, who's this gentleman here, my then boss, Phil. And he's like, hey, do you want to be a recruiter? You seem like you can sell stuff. And I was like, I don't know what a recruiter is or a recruiter does, but he mentioned something about you could make a lot of money. So I was like, okay, well, I'll go along and have a coffee with him and had a chat. And that basically did me joining the recruitment industry in Tokyo for about 5 years, where I still learned the ins and outs of high-level executive recruitment within the healthcare industry. So that's dealing with companies like, very easy examples like Pfizer or Johnson & Johnson and stuff. And our job was to go out and find them the best talent, normally at the C-level. So that's anything from director level and above. Also dealing with top management consultants that they wanted to come in and do like their strategy development and SFE and all this kind of stuff. So during that period there, I got really good at understanding and assessing talent because the margins of expectation for them were so thin at times. Like they would turn down candidates because they'd be like, this guy's only got an MBA from this university here, and it's like, top 5 in the US. Oh, we want someone from the top 3. And then they'll just like neg a candidate and say that, no, they're not good enough for us and not hire them. So it was a very difficult time, difficult learning process, but I managed to survive it for about 5.5 years. So 4.5 years. Yeah, around there. And also one of the things I really enjoyed during that time too was I did a bit of work in training and also CRM management. So I helped redesign a lot of our training processes, and that helped new recruiters get into the industry. And now a lot of them have actually gone on to be really successful and do their own thing across different companies around Japan and Asia. And I also started to get my hands into a little bit of the technical side of things in CRM management as well, because obviously in the recruitment industry, data is super important, because if you have like a, dodgy phone number and you need to call someone in a hurry and that data's not clean, well, it's going to cost you a lot of money in the long run. So I learned all about data cleansing and also how to kind of set up somewhat of a CRM system that's actually functional from there, just from sort of curiosity and being interested in it. And so the next stage is then me coming back to New Zealand, and probably the more juicy part of me transitioning into the tech industry. Honestly speaking, at the end of 2019, if you'd asked me, I would have said, I'm going to stay in Japan and I'm going to get PR, because I was 2 years away from getting it, and then probably get like a nice little apartment in Tokyo and have family come over and stay and stuff. But, life has its ways, and unfortunately, COVID wasn't too kind to my industry, just because everything stopped in terms of hiring. And also, the industry was facing a bit of a downturn just with the economic difficulties everyone was having. And then on top, I just really started missing home as well, because it was the first time in maybe 10 years that I was like, actually it'd be nice to be back in New Zealand, and so on. So I bit the bullet And I was like, well, I'm going to come back into New Zealand, even though I didn't actually know what I was going to do. I just had to kind of get out of Japan at the time. And it's a whole nother story as to how do you navigate all of the MIQ requirements and also flights and stuff to escape a country during a pandemic. And I got back to New Zealand and I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do. I know I didn't want to do recruitment, but I wanted to kind of put something together in terms of all the different skills that I'd built up over the years. So that was like dealing with people and stakeholder engagement, learning a little bit about processes and how to do that there, understanding organizations and their needs and so on. And then also a bit of things on the technology side too. So I sort of reluctantly, to be honest, put my hand up to say, oh, maybe I'll just do this master's course and see where it goes. So I started that in early 2021, really not even knowing what a business analysis did, because I just kind of thought, well, this might be good. Tech makes, good money. I can make some good impact in some organizations. I'll do this. Didn't honestly have a plan, and I just kind of figured things out from there. So a few of the things I did there during that time was that I was like, well, I need to get some local experience and understand the landscape as to, what's the job market like. And by chance, through a random student job search application, I reached out to this company looking for assessment markers for candidates. And I didn't actually know what they did. And that was this company called Talent Solutions there, where I ended up doing part-time market research for them. So they actually ended up creating that role for me just on having a chat with myself, because they were really interested in understanding everything about what they called Planet Graduate. So for context, Talent Solutions is an organization that actually manage all of, well, not all of them, but a large number of either government or private sector graduate recruitment programs. So although you might see, for example, this organization has a graduate recruitment program, there was a really high chance it was actually outsourced by this company here. So while I was doing this market research about trends and graduate assessment, what were people looking for, what were the key skills that they were after, and what are the technology solutions that could help enable or further speed up the process of finding the best talent at the graduate level, I was getting all this inside information about like, hey, if you're going to work in government, here are the 5 things you need to know. Or the tech industry is looking for these kinds of skills here. Or these people here, are more in favor at the moment because of X, Y, Z and stuff. So although it was only a little part-time job, they literally helped me paint the picture as to, oh, this is what people are looking for graduate and entry-level roles. And then, at the same time, my flatmate actually came up to me and he's like, Greg, if you're involved the summer with tech yet, you should do it. And I knew in passing what it was, but I wasn't even planning on actually doing it because I just thought I'd be too busy with study and stuff. And I was quite happy with my part-time role that I was doing. And he's like, no, do it. Go to every single boot camp you can. Go out and meet people and talk to other people in industry. And I was like, oh, fine. So I kind of just signed up to that there and went along to all the boot camps, ended up meeting half his social circle for doing that there. And that actually ended up leading to me taking a summer internship at the company called Curious, which is it's a part of the Spark Group. We focus mostly on AI and data analytics solutions and stuff for New Zealand-based clients. And I learned a lot there initially. So I kind of took my market research experience that I had in there and then just applied it to focusing on data and all the different trends that are happening in there and how we could use data to enable clients within New Zealand. And this is kind of a funny story here in that they ended up keeping me on for another 6 months until graduation. And I kid you not, it was actually because they like my work and stuff, but they actually said, oh, you and the interns did a really good job organizing the company Christmas party, because we had this plan out from like 12 p.m. until I want to say about 4 a.m. in the morning. Actually, I don't quite remember, after about 2 a.m. that night. And they're like, yeah, you're the kind of people we like. We love your attitude. We love your work. I know you're not sure you want to go down the path of data because I didn't have a background in it. But if you want to stay on, we'll keep you on and we'll see what happens after that. Yeah. So I did that there until the end of trimester 1, until my graduation. So keep into context, at this time here, I was probably going on about 70 to 80 hours per week, just because I was that keen to kind of get into the industry. And yeah, finished up my contract with them and finished up my course as well. So I was at a bit of a crossroads as to what to do. Left Curious on really good terms and stuff, and they ended up, helping me out to find a few, providing a lot of support and advice about my next step as to what I could do. And my boss was actually a reference for my next company that I'm now currently at, which is being a business analysis consultant at Redvespa. And this role here actually came about through my time really at university, because I just met a few people who I know. You might see some familiar faces in the photo down here, certain someone. Yeah, she was that. A few people gave me an internal referral over to their organization, and that was a really nice warm introduction. And I went through the interview process, and I liked what they did and their mission, and I wanted to kind of build up my career in business analysis. Did a little bit of an arduous interview process, about 5 interviews and a big case study in front of the 2 partners, which wasn't too fun. And yeah, that's where I'm here now. So I've been here about 7 or 8, oh gosh, yeah, about 6 or 7 months now. I've just come off my first assignment, which is why I'm able to have a bit of a chat with you all today. Yeah, so that's sort of the career side and how I ended up in the tech industry. A few other fun facts. Yeah, so I joined Nextwork too because I wanted to, help improve and understand my own skill set, even though I just finished study and found a new job. So I went up into to summer of Azure. I've also kept in touch too with a few of my, I guess, ethnic and cultural commitments. So I'm quite involved in the Wellington Japanese and also Chinese community as well, which has also led on to a few interesting little opportunities here and there, just by helping out and volunteering now and again. And then on top, not much has changed since my university days. Now that I look at that. But yeah, so I've been quite involved also in my university's alumni group, the BA Korea meetup group, which Amber was kind to join us on yesterday. And I've also done some mentoring at Summit of Tech as well. And I hope to do that more as the year goes on. And then lastly, yeah, I'm also currently in training for a charity boxing fight through IT Heavy Hitters to help raise money for mental health awareness for this company charity called Voices of Hope on top. So, but before we chime into like things about, I guess, where some advice and stuff would come in, I'll just kind of open up the floor if there's any questions as to how I sort of made my way halfway around the world and back again, and then somehow landed up in the tech industry in consulting. Are there any questions or any thoughts from anyone at the moment?
I had a question actually. Why didn't you stick with recruitment when you came to New Zealand?
Yeah, really, really good question. The number one thing was actually is that it's a very fleeting industry and it's very network based. So I'd have to come back to New Zealand and have to build up my network again, all from zero, basically. And if you didn't have a good network, then the reality is that you wouldn't do particularly well in the industry. So I didn't really want to invest all this time to come back halfway around the world again, uproot my life, and then be like, oh yeah, I'll stay in recruitment, because I know I could do it, but I just didn't want to do it. And then also, I guess I had this epiphany when I was like over there in Japan, sitting in my room during COVID, during the lockdown, and I'm like, if I keep this pathway up, I'm going to be a recruiter when I'm like 40. And that thought just scared the bejesus out of me. Because it's an industry that's quite monotonous and it's quite, taxing at times, because you're just going in, talking to people, saying, yes, I'll find you a job, and yes, it's all great. And sure, there's a nice financial element to it, but I kind of wanted to do more with life and have a bit more of an impact as to, what I could do as a person, I guess.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So, look at Depti, your hands up. If you have any questions or any thoughts.
I think her hand's been up since the very beginning when I asked about who's looking for a job.
Okay.
And she looked like she was in the car, so she might be driving somewhere.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, for the sake of time, because I kind of just shared a whole bunch about myself and I don't really want to talk more. yeah, you know, just taking from my experiences, either going through internships here, transitioning into a career and stuff, I've sort of come up with a short summary of different things that you'd be open to share, that I'm open to talk about. So if anyone wants to kind of type in the chat as to what they'd want to hear about, or just raise your hand and ask a question. Yeah, I'm just open to the floor about any questions around recruitment processes, how to identify your strengths and stuff, or sell yourself as a graduate career transitioner, or, you know, writing resumes and all that kind of stuff.
Santina, did
Yeah.
you have a
Santina?
question there?
Yeah, just sorry, quickly, Greg. Would you recommend going through a recruiter, or do you think it would also be best like seeking out your own thing? Is there like a preferred way one should be job searching?
I think it depends on, I suppose, who has the best relationship with the client that you're looking at applying to. Because going through a recruiter is good because it puts a middleman in, and they probably have a pre-existing relationship, for example, with an organization, and they can kind of smooth out some of the, you know, gaps and stuff a little bit quicker. But it's equally as effective as, say, using an internal referral program as well. So maybe if you knew someone in an organization, they can introduce you for a more casual conversation with someone. It's equally as effective as well. Or another thing too, if you think applying direct is the best way, you can follow up yourself. It really depends. I always say that the more closer you can get to a decision maker directly, the better. So if you have a friend or you know someone, that helps out a lot more. But at the same time, it doesn't guarantee the outcome. You still got to go through the process anyway. But it just kind of makes things a little bit easier for your entry point in talking to a company.
Amazing. Cheers for that, Greg.
Yeah. Any other questions or any other thoughts so far?
Yep, Rena, did you have a question?
Yeah. I think I had two questions. My first question was with regard to the master's in business analysis or analytics that you did you feel that limited you to not having enough opportunities, say in data engineering, cloud computing, or artificial intelligence per se? Because business analytics, a master's program, is something I was considering at this stage of my career after graduating with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and Biology. So I was just wondering, to what extent does that limit or not limit your options?
Yeah, good question. I guess the course that I did here in business analysis, it's quite broad based, so it covers all sorts of techniques and skills, with data being one of them. But if you were to say, I know that I want to go down a data engineering pathway, or I want to go down a pathway using AI or machine learning, but then I would say start specializing early, because the skills and, you know, knowledge you need, even just the fundamental for that there is a lot more specific and a lot more you know, rich in comparison to doing a more broader based degree. And also too, like with me, the conversation that I had with Curious at the time around data analytics and stuff, that, you know, one of the conversations we had and me staying on was like, well, if you wanted to stay on, that's all good, but we'd probably want you to go through a technical pathway anyway. So then I was like, well, I just spent a lot of money on this master's course, which is something that I wasn't quite prepared to kind of sacrifice and give up at the time. So I thought, well, the worst case, I can go out to the market, maybe learn about data and come back to it in the future. And that's the kind of the way that I took it. But yeah, it depends again, like you said, what's your end goal? So if you're going to go into, you want to go into the field of data engineering, again, they'll ask you the same question. Well, why'd you study business analysis when you could have done a data engineering degree? Or, you know, you could have focused your energy down that way there.
Fair enough. Cool.
Yeah. Any other just initial questions or any things?
I'll come back.
Yep.
Come back. Thank you so much.
Yep, no worries. Yeah. No. Santino, got another question?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, just looking at like cover letters.
Mhm.
What would you say, like either recruiters or like employers are looking for in a cover letter that would like stand out to them?
Number one, it needs to be personalized and come from you, because if you're writing a generic cover letter that you're going to send to every organization, you're going to get a generic response, and people are going to see you that way. So I always focus on the idea of creating the narrative, which is kind of taking all your interests and all your experiences and telling it as a story as to what is the reason why you're applying for the company, why you're interested, and what you can contribute. Because then that starts a logical conversation in someone's head, and like, oh, this person here is interested in us because of that, and they are also really interested in this field because of that. So then you go on to the next step. And really that is just doing your homework about the company and saying that I'm interested in banking because of this and that. And also, most importantly, and this is what I can bring to the table. And if you can do that there and just kind of get a nice balance and tell a nice story as to why this is interesting for you, then they'll respond back with interest. Otherwise, if you just put, I'm interested in your organization, full stop, they'll be like, why? So on and so forth. Yeah. But I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. And on the topic of cover letters too, I will always say it's good to get them read by other people to give a different perspective and stuff and kind of refine them, and so on and so forth. There's an online question here from Amber. Thoughts on using LinkedIn to reach out to people at a business you want to work at directly? I think that's a great idea, because it brings you one step closer, to the business that you're working at, and secondly, you can get direct information from them as well. And if they do like you, and it could just be a simple coffee conversation, they can immediately refer you upwards to someone like that. So, for example, I had a friend who was actually at, she now works at Datacom, and she actually did that technique there. So I'll get to your question, Sophie, about the negotiation, the salary. So she basically just reached out through a few connections she had, set up a coffee, had a good chat with them. A few people in the team who are decision makers were there. They're like, wow, you're actually really interesting. And then they got back to her within 2 days with an offer. And it was just through, having a coffee and just setting yourselves and your passion and all that there. Because, I mean, ultimately, I think what people underestimate about the whole hiring process there is that companies don't hire people, people hire people. So you have a good relationship with someone, and you can build that there through things like casual conversations on, through coffees or through personal relationships. Well, if they like you, they're going to try to do something to help you at the least, right? Like, they might not be able to give you a job, but they'll refer you to a friend that they know or someone else in the department, and that helps open up your opportunities there. Yes, have we touched on how to negotiate the salary with recruiter? Well, Sophie, I'd probably say you're better to answer this one than me, not knowing your negotiation skills. But the thing for me about that there is, firstly, you really got to do your market research. So there's a lot of information online about, what salaries people should be expecting and stuff that you can find out. So if you know a graduate position is around, say, 65, 70,000 in tech, and the company gives you 55, well, you can already go, oh, actually, I know, because of the market information and stuff would be different. So I'm getting a bad offer or something like that. And secondly, again, if you go into the negotiation saying, I want 90 or 100, and the reality is 70, well, people are going to look at you in the opposite way, going like, oh, this person's not serious, or they're not really someone who can, we can take seriously, because the numbers are just wrong. So the first thing there is, once you then found the balance, is you normally aim for a number that's slightly higher than what you want, like about, say, 10 or 15% higher, because hopefully you'll meet down somewhere in the middle. So if you want, like, say, 65 to 70, and you want to say you want to get like a number of around 70, aim for 75, because they'll be like, oh, we can't do 75, how about 70? And then they'll bring it down to match. And then they'll be like, oh, cool, I got 70. But if you say, oh, I'm happy between 65 and 70, well, they're going to take the lowest salary band because then they save money, right? So having that kind of awareness as to where the line is and just playing slightly above it, being a little bit aggressive, is quite good, just to be able to sort of start that conversation without coming across as being like super aggressive or super over the top. Another way too is that if you have counter offers, this is a thing from like another organization, and they say, well, this company is actually offering me 95, but I really like you if you can give me something around this here. And they'll be like, well, we want you, but we know that you could go somewhere else. So it's kind of like this like romantic relationship, like they're infatuated with you and they like you. They'll be like, okay, we'll give you the number that you want there, like that. But again, that's something you can go into very much another time, and it does take confidence and a bit of experience around that. Yeah, next question. Who to contact on LinkedIn? Recruiters, HR, or the person you might report directly to if you are hired? Well, the reality is, I would always say if you can get a hiring manager's ear, the better, because they can make a decision faster. It's kind of like the hierarchy that we used to have in the recruitment industry was like, we want to contact the hiring manager, preferably someone really senior, and then you work your way downwards to the HR or the recruiter, because the reality is in an organization is that hiring managers make decisions to hire people, and then the recruiters and the HR people do the paperwork or the follow. So talking to a recruiter can be good, to get an idea about the company, but then you're going into a process with everyone else in the pool of like, 100 people, for example. Or if you're able to contact the hiring manager and they say, look, I'll talk to you, I'll introduce you to my recruiter, but know that hiring manager knows you. So when your profile comes up into the pool, they already know, oh, I remember this person. We had a good chat and a good coffee and they were really good to me. And then you can already start like from a warmer position as you go on in the process of the interview and stuff. Sorry, Deputy, how difficult is it to do a career transition in the present market, especially a non-IT to IT? Well, I guess I could say that, it is difficult because you actually have to do it, number one. So I'm not saying that the market conditions are difficult. It's difficult to do in itself, but like you've seen through, a lot of the stories at Nextwork, for example, and so on, for a lot of the Salesforce, certain activity people and stuff, like they've gone from being like, I know, people who were like in hospitality, they've gone into now working in the Salesforce industry, or people who were like pharmacists. I remember I met a girl, she's now working at Xero, for example, through Salesforce and stuff. So the reality is the process is tricky because you have to do it, but actually the tech industry is just craving for people because A, it's not really well taught in universities. So, and there's always a shortage of people, and B, New Zealand's incredibly reliant on international markets to fill a lot of the gaps anyway. So there's always going to be an opportunity for there. It's just kind of yourself figuring out what you want to do and how you enter the market so you can build your career from there. Yeah, Rena, I think you have a question.
Yeah.
Yep.
Contacting hiring managers on LinkedIn. How do I make sure that the message I send doesn't sound needy?
It's a good question, and I've probably sent over thousands of messages to people on LinkedIn, so I'll try to talk from some real world experience here. I guess if I can clarify, what would you say sounds needy just to kind of get an impression?
I guess just messaging them to first let them know of my intention to message them, because at the end of the day, my intention to message them is to get a job, right?
Yeah.
And but how do I make sure that when I'm coming across to them, I come out in a more natural way, saying that I actually want to meet you just because you do this, and I relate to that, and that's the reason why I want to talk to you. But I want to first clarify my stance that at the end of the day, I want to get a job out of it, but even if not a job, just chat. But I guess how do I make sure that I say it clear, and I also don't seem as if I'm being too chatty?
Yep, I can I can relate, because in the headhunting business, we'd actually often say, hey, we don't want you to move job, we just want to have a conversation with you. So I guess around that there, if you flip the script, sort of what you just said there is that I just want to connect up for my professional development, or I'm interested in what you do, is a really good way, because, you know, people know you're a student. They're going to look at your profile and they'll be like, oh, well, you're someone studying to get into the tech industry. So the context is already there without saying it. And if you can just use that there as a way to say, hey, you know, I just want to get some advice on how to develop my career and stuff, then they're going to be like, oh, okay, cool. And you can talk to them. And then if you have a good conversation and they're willing to help you out, you can then bridge that conversation with like, by the way, you know, what advice would you give about getting the job, or do you know about how well it gets get into your company? So you're starting out sort of building the relationship and making a nice warm conversation, and then asking them, rather than kind of going like, hey, I need a job, could you please talk to me? Which then people go like, whoa, I don't know you, I've never met you before, I don't know what you're interested in, and I don't know if you're worth my time.
Absolutely.
And stuff. Yeah. So I know it's tricky, but it's just kind of keeping a fine line. I almost akin it a little bit to dating actually as well, because if I went in trying to propose a ring to people, they're going to just run away from me straight away. So you got to kind of, you know, warm up, get to know them a bit, and yeah, have that conversation first. And if they like you and there's a good vibe and stuff, then good things will always follow. Because a lot of the things that I found is that people will help good people if there's a connection and stuff anyway. And if you can just build that, then good things will follow in the future.
Cool.
Okay. Sure.
Just one more thing. Would you recommend straight up going to the hiring manager, like not even the recruiter, so straight up going to the hiring manager and sending them a message on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I don't see why not, to be honest. Because I mean, the recruiter's job is, yes, they can help you in one way, but the hiring manager are the people that can share that information about what they do, right? So if you're taking the approach of, I just want to know more about the business or get some advice for developing a certain skill and stuff, could you meet me for coffee? You know, the people might respond, they might not, but at least you're trying to start that conversation straight away. Whereas if you go down into recruiter land from the get-go, then you're starting at that conversation with everyone else, and they'll be like, oh, send us your application to this email. And then you're kind of stuck there, basically. It's harder to go up like that. Cool.
Thank you.
So no worries, Rena. Good question. Yeah. So Peter, follow-up question on Dipty's question. Is it true NZ companies are looking for high-skilled workers in the IT industry, so it's getting harder to get into IT roles for a non-IT background? Well, it's true that they're obviously looking for high-skilled workers in the IT industry, but don't underestimate it in the fact that suddenly we're getting a whole bunch of migrants coming in or immigrants coming over to fill these roles, because there's always going to be opportunities for people coming in from all sorts of backgrounds and stuff, because the market demand is just so huge. And secondly, too, just because you're coming in from overseas doesn't mean you have the local context or understanding as well that someone like yourself who's lived here or studied here would have as well. So that's something that like people underestimate, that if you're, say, working in South Africa and the pace is like this, in New Zealand it's actually a little more like this, if not even slower at times, in the consultancy world or in tech and stuff. So there's a lot of nuances and stuff that can go into it. So yes, of course, overseas workers can come over, but it doesn't make it any easier for them. And on the other hand, too, if you can have that local knowledge and make that transition, well, at least they know, too, you can bring your subject matter knowledge from your previous career background as well. So like I know people here have been in STEM or education or working in a lab and so on. And if you're doing projects or products around that, you've instantly got both your background and knowledge in what you've done in New Zealand, and then also, you know, what are the tech skills you can put together with it as well. Yeah, so Jess, for IT recruitment, would recruiters look more at cover letters than resume, or the opposite? Good question. I don't exactly know which one they look at more, but I think regardless of which one you do, they're going to look at the content and the detail and look for more the key buzzwords that they're looking for. So if you're saying you're applying for a position in software development and cloud computing, for example, and on your resume or cover letter, it does not mention software development or cloud computing, your resume is instantly going in the pile. Let's not talk to this person, because they're just going to be like scanning through, looking for all the keywords and looking for the information that's going to go, oh, so this person's wanting to be a cloud developer studying Azure. Cool, that's what we need. Then they move them on to the next step. There's not much of a real science behind it, but a lot of it is just around knowing what's the content on there. Does it look right? Does it fit the part? And if it fits the part and the information's on there, then they just move it on to the next stage. Next one, before connecting with people on LinkedIn, make sure you build a good looking profile first. I did a sharing last week talking about how to build your profile and increase your influence. Yes, it's a very good tip, Sophie, and nice advertising there as well for our BA meetup group. So thanks for that. Definitely too, that's another thing that people underestimate as well, because recruiters spend a lot of time, or even hiring managers spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Even I spend a lot of time still on LinkedIn during my downtime and assignments. And yeah, if I see something and it looks like, that's kind of odd, this person's profile is incomplete, or they got like a funny picture, or they have kind of like, something doesn't seem right. Well, it's going to stick with me because I'm going to remember like, oh yeah, that person there had that weird picture of them at that party or something like that. And it was like really odd. It doesn't come across as professional. And same again too as the way that they talk about themselves or share their opinions on LinkedIn as well. So in a sense, LinkedIn can be a bit of a double-edged sword there, in that people, if you have a good profile, it can add a lot of value. But if you have a bad profile or bad behavior on there, it shows and people notice it as well. Another trick too, actually, about LinkedIn is that if you have mutual connections with people who are quite senior, like hiring managers and stuff, it does look quite impressive, because then people will start asking, why do you know this person? So I sort of looked at it from the perspective of like, oh yeah, so I just connected up with a lot of people in my old companies and stuff. So if someone asked me about them, they go talk to them and be like, oh, why do you know that person? They'd be like, oh yeah, I met them. They're a good person. It's like, ding, level up a little bit. Bit of a validity check. And at the same time, also, if I was connected up with someone and they're like, oh, I don't like this person, then that opinion there is going to stick with you as well. But it's a good little trick. So when you're going up networking and stuff, or you're playing with organizations, look at people's LinkedIn connections and you can kind of name drop them and stuff, or you can kind of say, oh yeah, I met so-and-so at this event and stuff, and they told me these really cool things, and kind of, again, creates good vibes between everyone. Yeah. So there's a few questions. Preeti, you got one more about messaging on LinkedIn?
Yes, great.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, my camera is not working.
No worries.
So what I have been doing is I have been quite direct on how I connect to LinkedIn. Suppose I message to person saying, hello, I saw a role XYZ on your company and I'm doing this, I'm interested. Do you have do you have any tips, or sometimes do you have a job description, or sometimes would you be available to have a chat or give me more information? That's what I have been doing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So what would be the effective way to be in touch with someone?
I guess it's the way that just gets people to have a conversation with you, to be honest. So if you feel the way of like being a bit more upfront with your intention, that's absolutely fine. That'll have its level of result. And if you feel being a little more softer, maybe wanting to have a conversation first, meet them for coffee, that's fine. Or yeah, I guess in some sense, I can't say like there's a magic formula, because everyone's going to respond to different things. Like I remember in the past, for example, in order to meet a candidate back in Japan, I saw a picture of him, and he had he was at like Fenway Stadium in Boston, and I just messaged him and I was like, hey, I'm a recruiter, but you don't look like you want to move job, but I'm a big fan of the Boston Red Sox. Do you want to just come along and have a chat for coffee about the Boston Red Sox? And the reality was, I follow a bit of baseball, but I'm from New Zealand. I don't know anything, right? And he's like, well, thanks for acknowledging I'm not interested in the job. Sure, I'll come along and have a chat. So I met him, and then that guy actually introduced me to his client, moved me upwards, and he was a little champion for me, and then we did a bit of work for that company. So the reason why I'm kind of bringing up that story there is that you don't necessarily have to go in with the approach of just also saying, hey, could you give me a job? It could just be something also around like, hey, I see you've been doing some charity activities, I'd be keen to get involved. Maybe you go in that way, you go help out a couple times, get to know them a bit, show who you are as a person, and then they get to know you, and then naturally all those other things you want to come out of it will eventuate naturally.
Greg, I was going to ask you about, are you aware of your thoughts on this? Your thoughts on this guy on Instagram? You heard of Jonathan Javier?
I have not heard.
Rena, he's asking about. He talks about how strategies of applying for jobs and strategies. I've actually seen some of his videos about how to template of how to message recruiters, etc. You look for a job in LinkedIn, you message a hiring go straight to the role for hiring manager, makes you see them. I'm just quoting a few I've seen. And also another thing as well about from my end when it comes to applying for jobs was, oh my gosh, I just know that blatantly they don't read your cover letter and CV. I was told this by a friend who works in recruitment, and I've also, after I felt the experience of it, where they don't actually read your cover letter. They have a software that actually picks out if your application has the keywords in their on their job application, looking for someone who's responsible, time management, etc. They'll contact you after, I don't know, like about 1 or 2 months, and they ask you, like, it sometimes it does, from my end, does piss me off, because they ask me, can you explain more about yourself? When I literally wrote everything about myself on the cover letter, and they just use the software to just, okay, this guy has passed our first the first stage, a green light of, okay, he's gonna be, we're sending the next hoop, and they're going, I did mention everything in the cover letter. I feel like sometimes telling them, I've mentioned everything in the cover letter, you wouldn't need to be asking me. You don't need to repeating myself like a parrot if you just read it. And okay, that's just
it's a fair point and observation, and the reality is, I guess, when you look at it from a hiring manager's perspective, is that a lot of the time they don't actually know the candidate's coming. So they might have be thrown into an interview 15 minutes beforehand sometimes. So they don't have the time themselves to be able to sit there and read through someone's profile or resume all the time. And again, I guess also in the recruitment world, especially as you mentioned, automation is becoming a bit more of a thing. I don't know how well it's being adopted in New Zealand, but I do know around the world, like you said, they are using AI machine learning tools to pick out the keywords and stuff and all that there. So there is a bit of a kind of colder element to it, but that, I guess, sort of emphasizes the fact and why you need to have your paperwork in order, because without having the right keywords in there or without having those experiences highlighted straight away, well, I mean, look, if it's a machine or if it's a human, it's not being picked up right.
And also, why does the recruitment processes take months to get back to you? Which is
that's something I found actually in New Zealand is something that can take quite a while. It's really dependent on the organization. So if you're talking about government, then yes, it will take a long time, because I have a very formal process where everything has to kind of go up the chain, down the chain, back up the chain again, and then down the chain again. And then 3 weeks later, you'll get a phone call. Oh, hey, we want to meet with you or something like that. But again, it varies in the private industry or how you kind of go in as well. Like the reason for me, for example, why I kind of went the internship pathway, because I knew that going through summer of tech would be the fastest way for me to get into industry, even though I had to pay with quite long, intense working and study hours. It kind of paid off, I guess, after that. So I can kind of get it in that, yes, it is frustrating that the organizations are going to take a while in times, and some of those things you can't change. But if you're not quite liking that, try find other ways. That's why, you know, going up to hiring managers or being more proactive can kind of get you pushed ahead of the queue. And it's the most important thing. Yeah, and kind of just dictating and controlling your journey, because you can only control what you can control right in this. And if you can't, you know, get the result that you're quite looking for, or maybe you got to look at making the changes and looking getting that advice that could help you.
How do I answer the question? Some recruiters have asked me for, what can you explain the gap in your resume?
Oh yeah, that's probably.
Sorry guys, I'm just gonna have to jump in here because there's a few meetings that people have to get to. So 1 p.m. So I'm just gonna put a pause here and just say, like, thank you so much. You've been absolutely amazing. You're more than welcome to stay on if anyone needs to stay on. But Greg, is there a way that people could reach you if they need to?
Well,
like
I'm
LinkedIn
on
or
Slack.
something like that.
Yeah, I'm on Slack if you're in the Next Work community. So feel free to reach out to me there, and I'll add my LinkedIn in the chat too.
Cool.
And you can just kind of add me in there if that's okay. Oh, there's a few new invites already. So what's going on?
Everyone is on it. Everyone is on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So feel free to add me in there and just use me as a reference anytime, because I do know it is difficult, and I probably went the more extreme pathway in saying that. But if you do kind of half the stuff that I did, you'll probably turn out okay as well. In my own little journey, and your own journey as you go out into the workforce and find your way in the world of tech. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Greg. I think there was no short of questions of there, and it's one of the very few times that we've actually had to cut it kind of mid-question. So I'm so sorry about that, Roshan. But thank you so much, Greg. We're out of time, but you've been amazing. Really, really appreciate it. So everyone, just put your hands together. Thank you so much. Good. And we'll see all of you next session, next Wednesday. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
no worries, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.